My name is Regina Fontaine, and I am 34 years old. I have never raised my voice at my mother. Not once in 34 years. Not when she moved my chair away from the dinner table. Not when she cut my speech at my sister's wedding. Not when she took the microphone at my own wedding and told 130 guests that I was theirs now, not ours. And my sister laughed and told me not to be the burden I had been at home. I did not raise my voice then either. I reached up, touched my hearing aid, and asked her to say it louder, so everyone could hear. She did. She was smiling when she did it. Then I said one sentence. The microphone came out of her hand and hit the floor, and nobody picked it up. They still don't understand how a woman who never argued had that sentence ready. I had it ready for 8 months. 3 weeks before that reception, my mother sat down in my office, a company I built out of a studio apartment, 9 employees, a concrete ramp at the front door that I paid for in cash, and asked me to hand over $180,000 for my sister. I said no. She stood up and told me that if I felt that way, I should stop calling myself part of this family. She had no idea what I had already found. She had no idea that in 5 days, on a Thursday morning, a judge was going to ask her a question she could not answer, and she had no idea that I was going to let her take that microphone. To understand the sentence, you have to go back 19 years. In October of 2006, I was 15 years old, and I had a fever. My mother took me to the emergency room on a Tuesday night. A doctor looked in my ears, looked in my throat, and sent me home. Flu, he said. Fluids and rest. 3 days later, she took me back. My neck hurt so badly I could not turn my head to look at her while she drove. They sent me home again. Virus, fluids, and rest. Come back if it gets worse. It got worse. On the 9th of October, I collapsed on the kitchen floor, and this time nobody sent me home. Bacterial meningitis. 11 days in intensive care. I don't remember any of them. When I came out of that unit, I could not move my legs, and the entire right side of the world had gone quiet. The diagnosis came in December. Transverse myelitis. The infection had inflamed my spinal cord, leaving incomplete paralysis and sensory loss below roughly the 10th thoracic level. Severe nerve damage had also taken most of the hearing in my right ear. The word they used was permanent, and they used it in a soft voice, the way you'd say it to a child. I want to be precise about what happened next, because it is the hinge of everything. They wheeled me out of that unit into a corridor with a green stripe painted on the floor. My mother was standing at the end of it with a folder in her hands. Not flowers, a folder. She looked at me in the chair. She looked at the folder. And the first thing my mother ever said to me about my own body was, not, does it hurt? It was, do you know what this costs? I was 15. I was trying to hear her out of my left ear because the right one was full of a sound like a refrigerator running in another room. I said, I'm sorry. That was the first time I apologized for existing. It was not the last. We went home in January. My father, Warren, built me a ramp at the back door out of plywood. It took him one afternoon. The wood cost him about $11, and it warped after 2 winters, so that going up, it felt like going up a small hill that leaned. He moved that ramp with us from house to house, and it stayed at the last one for almost 19 years. The first night I came home, I rolled up to the dinner table and there was no space for me because my chair, my old wooden dining chair, the one with the burn mark on the arm, had been taken out and put in the basement. To make room, my mother said. For the wheelchair, nobody ever put it back. So for 10 years, I ate sideways, parked at the corner of the table by the kitchen door, half turned, with my good ear pointed the wrong way. Here is the detail I remember best, and it isn't the chair, it's the salt. The salt shaker sat in the middle of that table, and to reach it I had to lean across my father's shoulder. Every single meal. 10 years, not once in 10 years did anyone slide it toward me. We lost the house in the summer of 2007. I remember my mother in the kitchen wrapping plates in newspaper, not looking at me while she said it. Your bills took the house, Regina. And then, because she wanted to be fair. I'm not blaming you, I'm just telling you. I was 16 years old. I believed her. I believed her for 18 years. We moved into a rental, and then, in 2010, we moved again. Into a 4-bedroom house in Rocky River with a big front porch and a lawn my mother was proud of. When people asked how we managed it, she had an answer ready, and she used it so many times that it wore smooth like a stone in a pocket. Grandma Vivienne left us something. The house had 14 stairs to the second floor. It did not have a ramp. I slept in the dining room. I was 19 the autumn I asked for the hearing aid. I had done the research because that is what I do. The kind I needed was $4,000. Our insurance did not cover adult hearing aids, and many plans still leave people paying most or all of that cost themselves. If you have ever had to learn that fact, you already know how it feels to say the number out loud to someone who has the power to say no. My mother was at the table with the newspaper. She did not look up. Be reasonable, Regina. That was all. 2 words and my name. 6 weeks later, I was in the dining room, which was my bedroom, and I heard my sister screaming in the driveway. I moved the curtain. There was a used Honda Civic parked on the concrete with a ribbon tied around the side mirror. Delphine was 16. She was jumping. My mother was standing next to it with her arms crossed, laughing. I let the curtain fall. I did not go outside, and I never asked that woman for another thing as long as I lived. Now hold on to that number because I need you to carry it with you. $4,000. 18 years later, I would find out exactly how much money my mother had access to on the day she told me to be reasonable. $912,000. It had been placed in a guardianship account under my name, and the record of it had sat in a courthouse 3 miles from her kitchen table since 2009, available to anyone who knew where to look. I'm going to tell you how I found it, but first you need to understand what those years actually cost me, because the money is not the story. The money is only the receipt. Between 2011 and 2013, I applied for 38 jobs. I learned things in those 2 years that nobody teaches you. I learned that if you arrive 5 minutes early, you get to watch the face change. The exact half second when the door opens and the person realizes you are at the height of their hip. I started writing them down. Not to sue anybody. I wrote them down so I would know I wasn't imagining it. I still have the notebook. Interview number 26 came from a receptionist application at an insurance office in Parma. The woman who interviewed me was kind. That is the part people get wrong. They think it comes at you with a sneer. It doesn't. It comes at you kindly. She said, "The desk is a little high." I said, "I can bring my own chair." She said, "It's just, we have a lot of walk-ins. and I'd hate for you to feel rushed." I thanked her for her time. I went out to the parking lot, and I sat in my car, and I wrote in the notebook, "Number 26. Desk is a little high." She smiled the whole time. I still have the notebook. The 38th application was for a data entry position in the billing department of a hospital in Cleveland, $12.50 an hour. A windowless room, 3 other people, 1 printer that ran all day. They were the only ones who called me back a second time. So a girl whose hospital bills had supposedly destroyed her family ended up in a room full of hospital bills. It is a joke, and God tells it with a straight face. I sat with my back to the wall because my right ear doesn't work and I needed to see who was talking, and I read, "This is Tish and your daughter." Everyone else in that room processed. I read. They would open a claim, check 3 fields, and close it. I would open a claim and go all the way to the end, and about once a week the end of a file did not agree with the beginning of it. A procedure billed twice, a code that belonged to a different visit, a denial triggered by 1 wrong digit in a date of birth. In 2014, I found a coding error that had let the hospital bill a woman $6,200 she did not owe. Nadine Kowalczyk ran the scheduling desk. She was 49, she had a laugh you could hear through a wall, and she was the only person in that building who pulled a chair down to my eye level when she wanted to talk to me. She did it without announcing it, the way other people don't announce breathing. She read my note about the $6,000. Then she came and found me. "You're the only person in this building who reads the whole file." I said thank you. I went out to my car at lunch, and I sat there and I cried, and it was not because someone had been kind to me. It was because it was the first time in my life that anyone had complimented me for something I did, instead of for the fact that I was still alive. I want to put 2 things side by side now, and I am going to do it without commentary, because you can do the arithmetic yourself. In 2015, I paid $2,900 for a professional coding certification. I paid it on a credit card, over 14 months, and I studied at a kitchen table in a rental house with 2 people I found on Craigslist. That same year, my sister posted photographs from Florence, Italy. The caption said, "Blessed." In 2016, I bought my first manual wheelchair that I chose myself, not one handed to me, one I picked. It was financed at 24.9%. It took me 3 years to pay it off. I gave it a name, and I never told anybody what it was. That same year, my mother posted a photograph of a new Lexus in a driveway. The caption said, "Finally treating myself." In September of 2018, my sister got married on a farm outside Chagrin Falls. 200 guests, string lights in the barn. They seated me at table 11, next to the kitchen door. "Easier for you to get in and out with the chair, honey." I had written a speech. It took me 6 weeks. I rewrote the second paragraph 11 times because I wanted to say something true about her without saying anything cruel, and that is harder than it sounds. Halfway through the toasts, the man with the microphone looked at his card and said, "We're running a little long, folks, so we're going to move straight into the father-daughter dance." That was it. I sat at table 11 for 40 minutes with the paper folded in my hand. The kitchen door swung open and shut behind me. Nobody came over. I took the speech home. I still have it. You'll want to remember that. In February of 2019, I quit. I had $3,100 saved and no health insurance for 90 days, which, for a woman with my spine, is not a risk you take unless you have run the numbers and decided you would rather die than spend another year in that room. The thing that almost stopped me was insurance, professional liability coverage. I could not responsibly take clients or satisfy larger contracts without it, and I could not afford it. Nadine handed me a check for $2,000 in the parking lot. It was nearly everything she had. I said, "I can't take this." She said, "You read the whole file, Regina. Nobody reads the whole file." She would not call it a loan, write a contract, or take interest. She said that if I tried to make repayment a condition, she would take the check back. My first client was a woman whose insurer had denied a claim for $2,400. I found the error in the second read and won it in 11 days. My fee was $200, a flat rate I charged before I had a real business model. I put those $200 in a shoebox under my bed, and I did not spend it for 4 years. That same month, the first transfer began moving money into my sister's new supplement company. By 2022, those transfers would total $96,000. Nobody told me. Nobody had to. It wasn't my mother's money to explain. It was mine. I called the company Northbridge Claims Review. The model was simple enough to explain in one breath, which is the only kind of business a person with no money can start. If your insurer denied you or your hospital overcharged you, you sent me the file. I read it, all of it. If I got money back for you, I kept 25%. If I got nothing, you paid nothing. In my first 12 months, I took 10 clients and recovered $31,200 for them. My share was $7,800. I ate a lot of eggs. In 2020, my landlord sold the building, and I had 30 days. I called 22 apartments. I made a spreadsheet because I make spreadsheets, and the last column was headed with one word: steps. There was nothing. Not in my price range with a working elevator. Not in that city. Not that month. I slept in Nadine's spare room for 5 months on a folding cot next to the washing machine. When it hit the spin cycle, the whole floor moved. That was the year my sister moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the lake. And that was the year my mother called me. Once. I remember exactly where I was, because there was only one place I could be. I was on the cot. It was a Sunday. The washing machine was running. She didn't ask where I was living. She didn't ask how the business was going. She didn't say hello. She said, "Can you look at Delphine's insurance thing? You do that, right?" "What's the issue?" "They're saying something about a code. She's very upset about it. You know how she gets." There was a pause, and I actually thought, here it comes. She's going to ask how I am. She said, "Can you have it by Tuesday?" I said, "Yes." I did it that night, for free, in 3 hours. Sitting up on a folding cot next to a washing machine that shook the floor every 4 minutes, in a room that wasn't mine, in a house that wasn't mine. I sent it at 1 in the morning. She didn't reply. Delphine didn't either. In June of 2021, An insurer denied $31,000 of chemotherapy for a woman named Marguerite Barlow. The reason on the letter said "not medically necessary," which is a sentence written by people who have never sat in a chair with a needle in their arm. Her husband, Hollis, brought me the file. It took 9 weeks. Buried in it was the answer. The hospital had submitted the diagnosis code from her previous visit. One field, one old code, $31,000, and a woman's treatment hanging off it. She got her chemo. Hollis Barlow was 71 years old, and he sat in my office afterward with his hat on his knee. "Who taught you to do that?" "Nobody. I just read the whole file." He looked at me for a while. "Kid," he said, "that's forensic accounting. You just don't have the word for it yet." He had spent 30 years doing exactly that for a living before he retired. That autumn, I bought a power wheelchair. $8,300, out of pocket, no financing. I sat in it in the parking lot of the medical supply store for 20 minutes with the door closed, and I cried the way you cry when you finally get something 11 years after you needed it. I want to tell you about 2022 because if I skip it, you will start to think I am someone I'm not. I took a contract I should not have taken. An employer health plan with 400 employees wanted a full claims audit. It was 3 times bigger than anything I had done, and I said yes because I was afraid to say no. I ran 6 weeks late. They withheld $19,000 of the fee, and they were right to. I could not make payroll. I had exactly 1 employee then. Her name is Rosalind Kirchner. She was 24 years old, and I sat her down and told her I could not pay her that month and she should look for another job. She agreed to reduced hours for 4 weeks while I secured bridge money. I paid every deferred dollar plus an equal bonus in March of 2023. She is my chief operating officer now, and I have never made her ask twice for anything. What I learned from that year is the only business lesson I have ever needed. Stop promising what you have not already read. By the end of 2022, I had my first recurring contract with an employer plan, 3 employees, and revenue of $310,000. And I had an office, a real one, ground floor, on a street with a bus line. The door had 2 steps, so I paid a contractor $4,100 in cash to pour a concrete ramp. It took 2 men 3 days. My father had built me a ramp in 1 afternoon out of $11 of plywood. I sat in my car and watched them pour that concrete for 40 minutes, and when the man handed me the invoice, I asked him for a receipt, and he said the invoice was the receipt, and I said, "No, I want the receipt. I wanted the piece of paper with the date on it. I wanted proof that this ramp had been paid for." In 2023, I was interviewed on a small industry podcast, 4,000 listens. It was the first time anyone had introduced me as the founder of anything. I put the link in the family group chat. Delphine gave it a heart. My mother did not open it. My father typed 1 word, "nice." 3 hours later, my mother posted a screenshot into that same group chat of a photo my sister had put on Instagram and the number of likes it had, and there were 9 messages under it congratulating her. I left the group chat that night. Nobody asked me why. For 14 months, nobody asked me why. I met Elliot Vance at a fundraiser where I had been asked to speak for 6 minutes about medical billing errors, which is not a subject that fills a room. The sound engineer came over to fix my microphone before I went on. He got down on 1 knee so that his face was level with mine, and he asked me a question that no one, Not one person, not a doctor, not a teacher, not my own mother, had ever asked me in 17 years. "Left ear or right?" I said. "Left." He moved the microphone to my left side and said, "Now you'll hear yourself." That is the entire story of how I met my husband. He asked which ear worked. About 18 months later, a 71-year-old retired forensic accountant would ask me a different question over coffee in a diner on Detroit Avenue. And that question took my family apart. By January of 2025, Northbridge had 9 employees and 3 standing employer contracts, and we were on pace to do about $1.4 million for the year. I still took 1 case a week for free. I call them shoebox cases, after the shoebox under the bed, and I do not explain that to anybody who asks. In February, a woman came to me about her son. He was 12. He had been hit by a car 2 years earlier, and there had been a settlement, and now the money was gone, and nobody would tell her where. To work that case, I had to learn something I had never touched: how the courts handle money that belongs to a child. Here is what I learned, and I want you to hold on to it, because I did not know any of it, and I am a person who reads files for a living. When a minor receives a settlement, the child cannot control the money. A court appoints an adult to hold it. The legal term is guardian of the estate. Usually, it is a parent. That is not a loophole. That is the design. That guardian has a duty to account to the probate court for money received and spent. The court may require periodic accountings, and when the child becomes an adult, a final accounting before the estate is closed. Those records are generally public to anyone who knows which court and case to search. My work helped his mother trace and legally recover $44,000 for him. His mother hugged me in the parking lot afterward and said something so ordinary that I have thought about it almost every day since. "I just never thought to look. Who would think to look?" I drove home that night with the radio off. In March, Hollis Barlow and I were sitting in a booth in a diner on Detroit Avenue, and he was stirring his coffee, and he said it the way old men say things, sideways, half to himself. "You had a settlement, didn't you? When you were a kid, that hospital business." "There was a lawsuit," I said. "I don't know what happened with it. My mother handled it." He put the spoon down. "Regina, a guardian of the estate has to file an accounting with the court every year, and a final one when you turn 18. He looked at me. "Have you ever seen yours?" "I don't have one." "A settlement that large would usually leave a court record, guardianship, restricted account, or approval file," he said. "If yours went through probate court, the record may still be there." He picked the spoon back up. "Go look." The first week of April, I stayed at the office until everyone else had gone. At 11 o'clock that night, I opened the public index for the Cuyahoga County Probate Court, and I typed my own name into it. I typed it slowly. I made a mistake. I deleted it and typed it again. The screen returned one result: guardianship of Regina Fontaine, minor. Opened 2008, closed 2009. Status terminated. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. The cleaners came and went. I did not cry. I did not call anybody. I did not call Elliot, and he was asleep 4 miles away. I did the only thing I have ever known how to do. I hit print. The file was 340 pages. I read the whole thing. Of course I did. On page 9, there was a number. In September of 2008, the hospital settled $1,860,000. The attorneys received $620,000. Medical and reimbursement liens consumed another $328,000, and what was left, $912,000, was deposited into a court-supervised account, my account. My name on the caption, my case number, and the guardian of that account was Cordelia Fontaine. On page 206, there was a signature. It was mine. March of 2009. 3 signatures, 3 tabs, and I remembered it. I remembered the room in the rehabilitation facility, and the smell of it, and the gabapentin they had me on for the nerve pain, which makes the world feel like it is happening one room over. I had just turned 18. I had been 18 for 9 days. My mother came in with a blue folder and a pen, and she said, "Hospital paperwork, honey. Sign at the tabs." I signed at the tabs. I signed a waiver of notice. I signed a consent to the final accounting, and I signed a receipt, a document in which I, Regina Fontaine, an adult of sound mind, acknowledged that I had received the entire balance of my guardianship estate, $912,000. I have never held $912,000. The receipt allowed the final account to be approved and the guardianship to close as though the balance had been delivered to me. The records showed the money released. The later bank exhibits showed it moving into accounts my mother controlled. I spent 3 months gathering records and rebuilding where it went, nights, weekends, after everyone had gone home. Probate filings, county property records, Ohio business registrations, archived bank exhibits, and later account records that nobody in my family had examined in 16 years. I do not want to give you a lecture. I want to give you 8 lines. $268,000. The house in Rocky River, purchased 2010. Titled to Cordelia and Warren Fontaine. 14 stairs, no ramp, $214,000. My sister's tuition, housing, and 1 semester in Italy from 2012 to 2017. She did not graduate. $58,000. My sister's wedding. September 2018. The one where they cut my speech for time and seated me by the kitchen door. $96,000. Seed capital for my sister's supplement company, paid out between 2019 and 2022. $122,000. A Lexus, a cruise, a timeshare in Naples, Florida. $71,000. My father's smoothie franchise. It closed in 14 months. $63,500 spent on me. Between 2008 and 2011. A chair, 2 years of physical therapy, a shower seat, $19,500, unaccounted for entirely. And then there is the last line, and it took me a while to type it because I kept expecting to find something. Settlement money documented as spent directly on me after 2011. $0. Not almost nothing. Not a small amount. 0. It is the cleanest number in the whole file. In June, I went back to the same courthouse, same building, 3 rows of shelving over. Estate of Vivian Fontaine, deceased August 2009. My grandmother, 4 pages. Total estate, $61,000. A Buick, a savings account, divided 3 ways among her children. My mother's share was approximately $19,000. For 16 years, every time somebody asked how the Fontaines could afford a 4-bedroom house in Rocky River, my mother said, "Grandma Vivienne left us something. She did. She left her $19,000. The rest of it came from what happened to the body of a 15-year-old girl, and my mother spent it as if it belonged to everyone else.
Judith Ostrander is a probate litigator with an office above a bakery and a handshake like a car door closing. I brought her the file. I did not cry in her office. I did not tell her the story. I handed her a spreadsheet. She read it for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she took her glasses off. 3 things, she said. 1. A guardian who cannot account for estate funds can be surcharged and may face a presumption that the missing money was mishandled. That comes from the fiduciary rules, not from me. 2. We can ask the court to vacate the 2009 approval for fraud on the court. That kind of fraud is treated differently from an ordinary late claim, especially if the final account and receipt were procured by deception. 3. We have a strong argument that the limitations period did not begin until you discovered the fraud in April. I said, so I still have time. And Judith Ostrander looked at me across that desk and said, no, she still has time. That's the difference. Right now, today, she could still pick up the phone and tell you herself. That is worth something in a courtroom, and it's worth more than that everywhere else. So I waited 3 months, July, August, September. I need you to understand what that was because it looks like strategy from the outside, and it was not strategy. Every one of those nights, the file sat on my desk. Every one of those nights, I could have driven to Rocky River in 22 minutes and knocked on the door and asked her one question, and she could have said one word, and I would have taken it. That is the humiliating thing I have to tell you. I would have taken one word. In August, I got as far as her driveway. I sat in the car with the engine running. The porch light was on. I could see the shape of her through the front window, moving around the kitchen, and I thought about the shallow drawer by the sink with the takeout menus in it, and I put the car in reverse and I drove home. Because I already knew. She had my number every day of those 3 months. She never called to tell me the truth. My sister's company received an FDA warning letter in August of 2024 after marketing supplements on Instagram with claims that they could treat or cure disease. In February of 2025, the Ohio Attorney General's office opened a consumer protection inquiry. In September, her husband moved out, withdrew the financing he had been providing, and began fighting her over his ownership interest. I want to be very clear about this because it matters to me. I did not do that. I did not call the FDA. I did not call the Attorney General. I did not know any of it was happening until I saw her crying into her phone camera at 2 a.m. Everything that happened to my sister built with her own 2 hands. By the end of September, she owed about $180,000, a small business loan she had personally guaranteed, and 4 credit cards. And that was when my mother started calling me. The first call came on a Tuesday. It had been 14 months since anybody in that house had typed a word to me. I looked at the screen. It said, Mom. I let it ring out. It rang twice more that week. Then the text came. We need to talk about your sister. Family is family. I read it 11 times. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer, and I went back to work. Sordi. She came to my office on the 21st of October. No appointment. She came up the concrete ramp I paid $4,100 for, and she did not notice it, which I want you to understand is not a metaphor. She physically used it. She did not see it. She sat down in the chair my clients sit in, and she looked around the room, the desks, the phones, Rosalind on a call behind the glass. And the first thing she said was, "This is bigger than I thought." Then she asked me for $180,000. She was reasonable about it. My mother is always reasonable. That is her whole method. She laid it out like a woman explaining a bill.
You have all this. Your sister has nothing. She has her own name on a loan and a husband who left. And Regina, after everything this family spent on you, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask." The furnace came on. I could hear it in my left ear. I asked her one question. "How much did this family spend on me, Mom?" She didn't hesitate. She didn't even have to think about it. There was something almost proud in it, the way she lifted her chin. "More than you'll ever know." I let that sit in the room. Then I said, "No." She stood up and put her purse on her shoulder. "Then don't call yourself part of it." She walked out. She left my door open. Judith filed on the 24th of October 2 documents the same morning: a probate motion to vacate the 2009 order approving the final account for fraud on the court, and a separate civil complaint for breach of fiduciary duty and conversion. The probate court set the motion for an initial hearing on Thursday, the 13th of November. My wedding was Saturday, the 8th, 5 days. Judith asked me carefully if I wanted to move the wedding. I said no. The process server went to the house in Rocky River on the 28th of October in the late afternoon, and my mother signed for it at the front door. I know exactly what happened next because my father told me later, standing in a hotel lobby, unable to look at me. He was in the kitchen. He called out, "What was that?" And she said, "Junk, some lawyer trying to sue the hospital again." And she opened the shallow kitchen drawer by the sink, the same drawer where Warren had hidden the bank statements in 2013, dropped the envelope among the takeout menus and dead batteries, and shut it. That drawer is going to come back. Remember it. She had been lawfully served. She simply refused to read closely enough to understand what had been served on her. And 11 days later, she walked into my wedding believing that she was still, as she had been for 19 years, the person in the room who decided what things meant. I did 5 things in the week before my wedding, and I did not fully explain any of them to anyone. I changed the seating chart. Judith Ostrander was moved to table 4, near the front. Hollis Barlow was seated next to her. I asked the venue to record the soundboard for the whole reception. I told them it was for the videographer. I asked Judith to bring certified copies of the guardianship account, my grandmother's estate file, and the proof of service. I told Nadine nothing about the court filings or what I might do if my mother took the microphone, because Nadine cannot lie. And on the 5th of November, 3 days before the wedding, I said one sentence to Elliot in our kitchen. "If my mother takes the microphone, don't cut it. Let her talk, and give me the second mic when I raise my hand." He put down the dish he was drying. "Why?" "Because she may try to humiliate me," I said. I need one chance to answer her in my own voice. He looked at me for a long moment, and then, "And this is the reason I married him," he said, "Okay," and he picked the dish back up. At the rehearsal dinner on the 7th, my sister had 3 glasses of wine and got sentimental, which with Delphine is the same thing as getting cruel. She leaned across the table and she was laughing. "God, Reggie, remember when Mom had to carry you everywhere?" Nobody corrected her. My father looked down at his plate. My mother smiled at the tablecloth. I put my fork down. "I remember," I said. Toshiterperman. The night before my wedding, I sat on the edge of a hotel bed and I took out the speech I wrote for my sister's wedding in 2018. The one they cut for time. 7 years, 3 apartments, 1 near bankruptcy. And I still had it. I read it. It was a nice speech. It said she was brave. And then I did something I am not proud of. I got up and I found a pen and I wrote my mother a card. I told her I loved her. I told her that I knew this year had been hard for her. And I told her I hoped that when she looked at me tomorrow, she would be proud of me. I put it in the little bag that matched the dress. I was going to give it to her at the reception. I still had it in that bag when she took the microphone. The reception was at a hall on the west side with a wooden dance floor and a low ceiling. 130 people. At 20 minutes to 8, my husband was standing near the head table with the microphone in his hand, about to say something ordinary about how happy he was. My mother crossed the floor and took it out of his hand. Nobody had asked her to speak.
She tapped it twice. She smiled at the room the way she smiles at a room, and everybody went quiet for her because she has always been very good at this part. "Well," she said, "she's married now." A little laugh from somewhere. "She's theirs now. She's not ours." And from the family table, my sister, with a glass in her hand, delighted, comfortable, in front of everyone I love, said, "Try not to be the burden you were at home." Some people laughed, not all of them. Nadine Kowalczyk did not laugh. I did not move for about 3 seconds. Then I reached up and I touched the hearing aid in my right ear. It is a habit. It is the thing my hand does when a room gets loud and I am trying to decide whether I heard what I think I heard. I raised my other hand and I said, "Louder, Mom, so everyone hears." And she did it. She lifted the microphone and repeated herself more clearly into a room of 130 people, into a system that was recording, still smiling because she thought I was giving her the floor. "She's theirs now. She's not ours." Elliot handed me the second microphone. He did not know what was about to happen. His hand was shaking slightly, and mine was not. And I remember thinking that was strange, and then thinking it wasn't. He handed it to me anyway. I rolled forward about 10 feet. There was no ramp to the riser, so I stopped in the middle of the dance floor, the light on the back of my neck, and let the microphone carry my voice instead. 130 people were watching a woman in a wheelchair be called a burden at her own wedding, and for those few seconds, shock kept every one of them still. I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Then I said one sentence. "I wasn't the burden, Mom. I was the budget." The microphone came out of her hand. It hit the wooden floor, and the speakers made a sound like a gunshot, and it rolled about 2 feet, and it stopped. Nobody picked it up. She recovered fast. She always recovers fast. She laughed, small and brittle, aiming it at the room instead of me. Regina gets confused when she's overwhelmed. "Honey, sit down," I said. "Judith." Judith Ostrander stood at table 4 with a folder containing certified public records. She did not speak. She did not speak. She only held up the certified copies long enough for the room to understand that I had brought records, not accusations. 7 years earlier, I had sat at table 11 at my sister's wedding, next to the kitchen door, holding a speech nobody let me give. That night, my lawyer sat at table 4. I did not raise my voice. I have never raised my voice at my mother. I spoke to the room because the room was who I was speaking to. In 2008, a hospital settled a lawsuit for what it did to me. $1,860,000. Somebody's chair scraped. After the attorneys and the liens,
$912,000 went into a court-supervised account with my name on it. My mother was the guardian of that account. In 2010, she bought a 4-bedroom house in Rocky River for $268,000. It has 14 stairs and no ramp. I slept in the dining room for 5 years. That same year, I asked her for a hearing aid. It cost $4,000. I touched my ear again. I did it on purpose that time. She told me to be reasonable. Nadine stood first. A man at table 7 followed, then 2 people beside him. Most of the room stayed seated, but the silence had changed. Sitting comfortably was no longer possible. My mother's voice went up. Grandma Vivian left us that money. Everyone knows that. Warren, tell them. Grandma Vivian left you roughly $19,000, I said. It's 4 pages. It's public. It has been public since 2009. And the room went completely silent. I want to tell you that I felt something enormous in that silence. I didn't. I felt very calm and very tired, the way you feel at the end of a long piece of work. I said the last part quietly, and the microphone carried it anyway. You were served 11 days ago, Mom. You told Dad it was junk mail. It's in the kitchen drawer. On Thursday morning, a probate judge will ask you to account for $912,000, and this time you will have to answer in a court record. Not me, him. And that was when my mother lost control of the story she had managed for 19 years. She screamed it across a wooden dance floor in a rented hall in front of 130 people who had come to watch me get married.
It was family money. I gave you my life. I carried you up every stair in that house. I did not raise my voice 1 decibel. You carried me up the stairs of a house you bought with my money, Mom. You could have bought one without stairs.
My father stood up. He did not say anything. He put his napkin on the table, and he walked out the side door, and I watched him go, and I did not stop him. My sister did not cry. That surprised me, and then it didn't. She sat very still at that table, with her hands flat on the cloth, and I watched her face, and I knew exactly what she was doing, because it is what I do. She was adding,
Somebody at table 9 looked up the probate index on their phone before the cake was cut. I know, because I watched him do it, and I watched him turn the screen so the woman next to him could see. That is the thing about public records. The trail had always been there. My mother only had to hope nobody in the family would follow it far enough to read the whole file. She raised the only person in the world who does.
My father came to the hotel the next morning, alone. He would not sit down. He stood in the lobby with his hands in his jacket pockets, and he looked at the carpet. I found bank statements in 2013, he said. I read enough to know the house and Delphine's expenses were not being paid from your grandmother's estate. Then I put them back in the drawer. He still would not look up. I told myself you'd never look. I asked him why, and my father, who built me a ramp out of plywood in one afternoon and never once replaced it in 19 years in a house with 4 bedrooms, gave me the most honest answer anyone in my family has ever given me. Because if you never looked, he said, then I never had to be the man who let it happen. I sat with that. I did not rush it. Then I said, Dad, there's a difference between one moment of cowardice and years of choosing silence. He nodded at the carpet. You did not make one bad decision. You repeated it every morning until silence became the life you were protecting. He started to cry. And here is the part I want to be honest about. I did not comfort him, and I did not want to, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. I said, "You can come to Thanksgiving if you understand that invitation is not forgiveness, but you cannot come to my office. That is the boundary. It is the whole boundary. He can be in my life in the room where we eat, and he cannot be anywhere near the thing I built without him." He said, "That's fair." It wasn't. It was more than fair, but I let him have it. My sister came an hour later. Her eyes were swollen, and her hair was wet from the shower, and she did not apologize. I want to be accurate about that. She did not say sorry, not that day, not once. She asked me a question instead, and it was the first time I had ever heard her face the truth between us without looking away. "Did I go to college on your legs?" I said. "Yes," and Delphine Fontaine sat down on the floor of a hotel hallway, not in the chair, on the floor, with her back against the wall, next to a housekeeping cart. "Mom told me you were fine," she said. "She said you had money from the hospital. She said you just didn't want to be around us." "I know. She used to call me the easy one." "I know that too." She put her head back against the wall. "What am I supposed to do now?" And this is what I said, and I had thought about it for a long time, and I meant every word of it. "I'm not going to save you, Delphine. You built that company, and you owe that money, and it's yours. But I will not use what happened to humiliate you or make your failure worse. That's the most I've got. It's more than I was given." She nodded. She sat on that floor for a long time after I left.
Thursday morning, the 13th of November, we appeared in courtroom 4 of the Cuyahoga County Probate Court for the hearing on Judith's motion to reopen the guardianship case. My mother wore navy. She had her hair done. She had no bank statements, receipts, ledger, or reliable accounting to support the final account the court had approved in 2009. In her case, the system had accepted a mother's paperwork without asking closely enough what had happened to her disabled daughter's money.
The judge was patient with her for a while. Then he stopped being patient. "Mrs. Fontaine, where did the money go?" "It went to the family." "You were not the family's guardian," he said. "You were her guardian. Those are not the same job." She turned around in her seat, and she looked at me, past Judith, past the rail, and she said the thing she had said in my office 3 weeks earlier. The same 5 words. She probably didn't even hear herself do it. "More than you'll ever know." I wrote a number on my legal pad and slid it to Judith. When she asked whether I understood the amount at issue, I looked at my mother. 92,000. "Yes," I said, "I know exactly how much." The court reopened the guardianship matter that day and later vacated the 2009 approval after reviewing the record.
The legal fight did not end that December, but the evidence ended the argument. The Rocky River house was sold. The proceeds went into escrow, and the settlement payment was wired to me nearly 17 years after the guardianship had closed. I did not enforce every dollar the settlement allowed me to collect. I agreed that enough of the sale proceeds could remain for them to rent a ground-floor apartment in Lakewood. I did not do it because I forgave her. I did it because I did not want to become the thing she was, a person who looks at someone with nowhere to go and decides that stairs are their problem. That is the only reason. I don't have a nicer one. The week the Rocky River house closed, I watched 2 workers pull from the back door the same plywood ramp my father had moved with us from our first house. It came up in 3 pieces. It had been warping and rotting for almost 19 years.
I asked them if I could have one of them, and the younger one looked at me like I was strange, and then he shrugged and handed it over. $11 of plywood. It held up 19 years of a story about who cost this family what. It is on my desk now, not like a trophy, like a specimen. I used part of my recovery to fund a separate free program operated through Northbridge with its own budget and records. It's a free program. At an adult former ward's request, we locate any available probate or guardianship record, review the accounting, and explain what the public file shows. We read the whole file. We tell them what's in it. Rosalind runs it. Nadine answers the phone. Hollis audits everyone before it goes out, and he does it for free, and he grumbles about it, and he has never once said no. In the first 2 months, 31 people applied. 3 discovered funds or claims they had never been told existed. 3 people who grew up being told what they cost finally learned what had been kept from them. That is what I did with it. That is the whole revenge. That first December, while the legal case was still pending, my mother sent me a letter. 4 pages, front and back in her handwriting. I read all of it. I read it twice. I did not answer it. I did not throw it away either. It's in a drawer in my office, next to the piece of plywood, and next to the card I wrote her the night before my wedding. The one that says, "I hope you'll be proud of me." The one I never gave her. Some things you don't answer. You just keep them so that you remember they happened. Elliot and I bought a dining table in January while the case was still pending. It's round. I did not explain to the salesman why it had to be round, and he did not ask, and he would not have understood if I told him. Nobody sits at the head of a round table. There is no head. There is no seat that is closer to the food, and no seat by the kitchen door, and nobody has to lean across another person's shoulder for the salt, because the table is small enough that anyone can slide it to anyone else. That was the point. That was the entire point. My mother was right about one thing that night, into the microphone, in a hall on the west side, in front of everybody. I'm not theirs anymore. I'm mine. If they once made you apologize for existing, leave the sentence you wish you had said. I'll read it.